What the Israelis have done effectively is take out those sort of air defense facilities that Iran has, and also to target some of those, drone production and missile production and other launch sites. It won't have been as comprehensive as I think people might have imagined, because obviously Iran is a very large country and they would have had to cover a huge amount of space in 3 hours. You can't do that. But nonetheless, it will have served a very strong signal to the Iranians that the Israelis can reach them and can inflict damage.
Iran has been warned not to retaliate after Israel struck military sites across the country during a 3-hour wave of attacks. Dozens of Israeli fighter jets targeted Iranian ballistic missile production facilities, air defence batteries and missile launchers. It's the most read story currently in the Times Online, and we've been covering it in depth this morning. We can speak now to Professor Ali Ansari, Professor of Iranian History and Director of the Institute for Iranian Studies at the University of St Andrews. Ali, good morning.
Good morning.
Just tell me what you make of the response that we've heard from Iran. They are stressing that the damage has been limited. What do you think they're trying to convey?
Well, the main thing they want to do is to keep the population calm. I mean, that's basically what they want to do, and it's essentially, what they're saying is they're diminishing really the consequences of this. So, I mean, in terms of whether the Iranians will respond or not, they basically, they've cornered themselves in that sense. Given that they're now arguing that the Israeli strike was pretty inconsequential, there's no real justification for them to take to retaliate in response to this.
So you'd be fairly confident that they've decided the way in which they're responding this morning tells us that actually they think, okay, we're not going to signal a marker, that we're going to retaliate in some form.
Yeah, I mean, the way they've been presenting it, I mean, they put out every possible measure to say that everything is normal. The currency has regained a little bit of strength this morning. They've been showing videos of people out, living their lives normally, exercising in the morning, so on and so forth. So they're really trying to emphasize, as they did last time, actually, the last time the Israelis had an attack in, I think in last April, they want to say that it's normal. Nothing has been affected. Now, we know that things have been affected, but that's the way they're presenting it, and of course, what it will mean is that it doesn't really give them the justification to take the step further. And I think lots of people in Iran will be very relieved, it has to be said. I mean, nobody really wants, certainly no one outside the regime really wants a full-scale conflict with Israel to keep going.
Because remind us the context of this and what happened at the beginning of the month.
Well, the context really, obviously, is the Iranians had launched something like about 180 missiles towards Israel in response, in their mind, to the assassination of the murder of Nasrallah in Lebanon. But this had also been really after a period of 3 to 4 months where the Iranians have been very, very badly humiliated, both in Lebanon and other parts of in the region. But so they felt they had to do something, and obviously this attack on Israel was going to prompt a response, and everyone has been very anxious to make sure that the response was as proportional or as targeted as it could possibly be. And to the extent that we can see this morning, the Israelis have done that. They have targeted towards military sites. They haven't gone for civilian sites. They haven't gone for economic infrastructure. This means basically that they are, they're not deliberately or going very, very determined to escalate the situation themselves.
Yeah. Those sites, how much damage do you think Israel has actually managed to inflict on Iran's military capacity?
It's completely unclear at the moment. We just don't have information, unfortunately. It would seem to be that if you sent 100 aircraft over, I mean, the key points that are interesting, I suppose, here are that the Israelis are able to penetrate Iranian airspace fairly easily. They launched them in 3 waves. Clearly, the targeted areas included areas around the capital city, Tehran. They have obviously hit these sites. There are videos now coming through, by the way, of Iranians themselves. I mean, one of the interesting developments, of course, is that the regime in Iran has said if anyone posts any videos of strike sites or anything, damage, they will get 10 years in prison. So it's very unlikely we're going to immediately get videos out. Although things will trickle through, and I think it will be clearer over the next few days as to the sort of damage that's been done. And if we are to understand the Israeli position on this, what the Israelis have done effectively is take out those sort of air defense facilities that Iran has, and also to target some of those, drone production and missile production and other launch sites. It won't have been as comprehensive as I think people might have imagined, because obviously Iran is a very large country and they would have had to cover a huge amount of space in 3 hours. You can't do that. But nonetheless, it will have served a very strong signal to the Iranians that the Israelis can reach them and can inflict damage. So, I think we'll get a better idea, with satellite imagery and others later on in the next few days. But at the moment, the Iranians, given that they're downplaying it so dramatically in that sense, and so, I think they said, what was it, 2 soldiers had died, and that's about it. They're not really giving themselves, for the probably, there's no real justification for them to say, well, we're now going to retaliate, because as far as they're concerned, nothing's happened.
Yeah, not playing this down is Hamas. They have
Yes.
said they've condemned this attack in the strongest terms. They've said the attacks are a blatant violation of Iranian sovereignty and an escalation targeting the security of the region. I mean, in terms of, you've talked about how the regime might respond, but what about Iran's proxies?
Well, here's the interesting point, of course. Iran's proxies have been severely weakened over the summer. I mean, this is the point. So they can, they can talk a good talk, but I think certainly as far as, the main threat really that Israel faced really came from Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has effectively been sort of decapitated. So at the moment, yes, there is an ever-present threat, obviously, coming from these proxies, but it's a much diminished threat. And I think that's partly also why the Israelis have felt more emboldened to extend it to Iran itself.
And to ask that, the Israeli endgame, what do you think that is?
Well, this is another big question. I mean, we're sort of trying to work out what this it's got to be a political endgame. The way they had been talking about it over the last few weeks, and, we have to accept that a lot of this also involves a certain degree of psychological warfare, was that they're going for the regime, and they're going for the regime in a big way. Now, how that might unfold, it's a very vague sort of type of goal in that sense, because I don't think the Israelis are in a position to encourage, in that sense, regime change. But that's what they've been talking about. And of course, what's happened in Iran has been, the reaction in Iran itself has been quite interesting, both among the population, but also in the economy. So people have been very, very worried. The regime will probably breathe a bit of a sigh of relief that it hasn't had a worse hit, really, in terms of how it looks, certainly. But I think the message will have got through that they are more vulnerable than they like to present themselves. And something that most of us know, by the way. I mean, I think this image of Iran as this great regional superpower or something is vastly over-exaggerated. I mean, I don't think even most Iranians believe that. But, it's all about perception, image, how they're trying to present themselves. At the moment, they're sort of basically able to sort of present themselves as having essentially survived this, and as having survived it, they feel good about themselves.
Yeah, and saying pretty much unscathed. It's all part of the kind of PR propaganda.
Yes.
Ali, thank you so much. Professor Ali Ansari, Professor of Iranian History, going through just some of the wider ramifications of Israel's actions overnight.